All right, welcome back to DevelopLex. Today we have on the program Stephen Dawahare. Stephen is involved in a lot of things, so I'm not going to try to give you a job title. I did look at some job titles ahead of time, but there were about 5, so I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. But Stephen's been a friend for a very long time on the real estate side of things, and then the Lexington Sporting Club. All of this happened, and we've been trying to get Stephen on for a little bit, but obviously we were a little early in the process. But if you can see, if you're watching on our YouTube, a little plug to watch on our YouTube, we are looking over the stadium right now, and if we had had this conversation 2 years ago, we would not have this same vision. So kudos to you for what you've done thus far, but I'll let you introduce yourself, and we'll talk about a little bit of your background, and then we'll go from there. So Stephen, welcome on.
Hey, well, thanks for having us here. Well, 3 years ago, we'd have been talking renderings, and I still think we're talking renderings because there's still a lot to go. But Stephen Dawahare from Lexington, I married my wife for 22 years and got 4 kids. This is home for most of my life, and
and then your daughter had a driving test today.
Yeah, so my youngest daughter. So I've got 3 down, 1 to go. So I've got 1 more driver on the road. So. I think she's prepared. Fingers crossed.
So let's get a little bit into just maybe your backgrounds, and then we'll a little bit run through the timeline of how we got to where we're at today. So born in Lexington, raised here. How did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, well, I mean, God opens and closes a lot of doors in my life, and I'd say that's probably the simple answer. But I went to school at University of Kentucky. Early on, I always had an interest in real estate. That was, some people around me that I saw that intrigued me. Didn't know exactly what that looked like. I was always sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, put it that way, and that got me into one deal that brought me to another deal, and then sort of the way life works, doors open up, and here we are today.
So, for as long as you can remember, a little bit of the real estate side of things piqued your interest. You weren't like, I want to be an attorney and I just discovered a deal. It was like, no, I want to do real estate.
Yeah, I think I realized that I had a lot of different interests, and I couldn't find myself into one particular trade that didn't seem to fit my personality very well. Growing up and when I was in high school, I'm selling T-shirts and I'm scuba diving from golf balls in college, and never shied away from trying new things like that. And but I always had, my neighbor was Phil Greer at the time, where I grew up, and I was intrigued with some of the stuff that he did that was going on. And actually, one of my first things coming out of college was working with them on trying to do site selections for Rite Aid Revco. I remember early on I could go in as an employee or I could come in as a partner. So I said, okay, I'll do a partner, but that means I had to cover my own expenses. So, I was camping in North Carolina because that was where we were, because I didn't have the money at the time to do anything. I think I made like $14,000 my first year out of college. So, but it kind of went from there and worked out well.
And what did that look like in like the day-to-day kind of things, site selection and opening?
Well, I mean, this is well before all the technology stuff. This was almost like bring the old-fashioned maps out and go to the intersections and circle it. And there wasn't a really big training program. I think they took me one time. This is how you do it. Go figure it out. And I think that was I was too dumb to realize what I didn't know, and just try to figure it out.
And so what would you say, date yourself a little bit? When would that have been? When would that segment of your life have been?
That probably was maybe 1995, 94.
Fresh out of college.
Yeah, no, fresh out of college. Literally, I was like right out of college. At that time, I had did a couple little things that time. I did, actually, Brian Wood and I did a little, we were doing some duplexes, he did that stuff. We were both trying to figure that out together. Cheddar's had just started, so I had saved up enough money just to be a little investor in that particular, and I should have stuck around for the whole entire thing, but I was in Las Vegas at that point when they really took off. But I dabbled around. I think that's where combination of the real estate, but also some of the investment side of things was interesting.
So was there at that time, so obviously we've shifted our focus quite a bit from, you doing duplexes to us sitting in front of the soccer stadium. Was there a deal that you did or an experience that you had that just completely altered your trajectory in real estate, or was it just kind of hanging around? And
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that changes my trajectory is after my technology took and be involved in the technology company that went public, because then I had capital. I had more meaningful capital to do stuff. Look, every project I've done since I was, very young, have all been impactful because you learn something, right? I still learn something today, and that's not really a cliche. Life is full of learning stuff. Each one of those things are a building block, I think, to be a part of where I'm at.
all right. So I got my first experience with you. We did some leasing for you guys, and then we did a shopping center sale in Indiana. I think one thing that I would say is interesting about you is I do think that you make a good partner. That's kind of been a theme for DevelopLex. A lot of our most successful guests have, and I noticed in you even talking through, the deals that you've done thus far, it doesn't seem like you're beating on your chest and saying it's a Stephen Dawahare thing. It seems like you're saying, I've had a lot of successful partnerships. Seemingly you're likable enough to be included in some of those partnerships even before you had the capital. Is there something that you view as like a tangible quality of being a partner that you feel like that you bring to the table? Like, are you the finance guy or I'm the site selection guy. I see a piece of property before it comes to life. How would you kind of define that for you?
Well, I think it depends on what the project is. I've been involved in a lot of different capacities from every parts of a development or a business. And what you'll find out with partnerships, not everybody needs to be able to do the same thing, and everyone, especially when you deal with other business leaders, you have to be respectful of their autonomy and their work, and so you got to figure out, how do you fit in best. The best business partnerships are the ones that recognizes, hey, this other person's very smart as well, and we're going to allow them to stay in their lane. I'll stay in my lane, and we'll kind of work together in the middle to figure this thing out. And if everybody respects that part of the process, I think it usually works out very well.
SVN Stone Commercial Real Estate is a full-service commercial real estate firm located in Lexington, Kentucky. Affiliated with the SVN International Network, SVN has over 200 offices across the globe. The SVN Stone team consists of experienced commercial real estate advisors in the heart of the Bluegrass. SVN helps their clients with commercial property sales, leasing, investments, and property management. Let SVN help you with your commercial real estate needs. Check us out at svnstone.com.
Let's kind of maybe shift a little bit into a huge reason we're sitting here today. Obviously, you have a ton of background. If somebody looks your name up online, they can probably find a lot of the projects that you've been involved in over time. But current day, we're sitting at Lexington Sporting Club, out 8th and Spoonsboro, Richmond Road, I-75, pretty strategic location. If you could kind of walk people, most people probably know what the project is, but if there's somebody that's listening from Charleston, South Carolina, that may have no idea what we're talking about, how would you kind of define where we're sitting and tell us a little bit about the background of the project, if you would?
Yeah, sure. So where we're sitting is right now, this is really the last exit into Lexington that hasn't really been developed. People who don't know the history of Lexington very well, and frankly, I had to learn some of this piece too, is understanding the history of, how did this area start getting developed before it actually was in the urban service area, or how did the airport was. And there was, back in the 1950s or 1960s, Lexington was the first city in the country actually to really define this urban service area that controlled like where we're able to develop. So where we're at actually started being developed before then. Then these rules came in, and then it stopped any new development, but they allowed this area to continue to be developed. So you just look at it objectively of saying, okay, where's growth? What's stopped us from growing in the past? A lot of it's been preservation of green space, the horse farms. That's I'm a big supporter of that, and I think there's a nice balance between the two. But this area, you recognize where there's really not a lot of horse farms out here. There wasn't a lot of the people talk about the soils and stuff that's needed. This was a prime area for when Lexington did develop. It was going to be here because before we got here, there was already sewer and all the infrastructure was in place. There was really there was no reason why it wasn't being developed other than the fact of it is you just couldn't. So when we decided to do the soccer project and we thought about the magnitude of what we wanted to do, it took a lot of land because we weren't just doing a professional soccer team. We've got youth teams. We've got a variety of pre-professional teams. That takes a lot of space. So today we're probably about 100 acres of it's soccer specific. 75 acres. One of the things that made it worked out well is we had a fairly large youth operation. There's over 1,000 kids in that program. You need fields, right? Just fields. It's one of the challenges we have with our climate, and it can be cold and it can be wet. It can be sunny, and grass fields don't work out very well. And so we needed fields. And so in order to build the fields that we needed space. What was interesting is we started looking about opportunities within Lexington. Soccer is you're able to do soccer in an agricultural portion, but only in this area, or part of Lexington within agriculture, could you do soccer fields with lights, and that's a big deal. And that was actually done when Sayre had expanded their project and got that approved. So that made this area interesting for that particular piece. This particular piece of property was zoned half agricultural and half commercial when we bought it. So there was 150 acres altogether. So it's like, okay, we all know in commercial real estate, you have to create traffic patterns. You have to get people to somewhere, which is going to draw other people. Well, our youth operations needed fields, need a place to work, and we were willing to put the capital into developing some really world-class fields out here. And so we draw thousands of people here. I mean, really, 10 months out of the year, it's very, very busy. Just bringing in, your kid for practice or for the big tournaments we have every weekend. And then with that particular piece, we also, what worked out really well, a little bit of luck, and was, we knew when we first started buying, we first bought some land across the street, actually, from where we're at, because, again, going back to what we discussed earlier, just logically made sense, like, why was this part of Lexington not developed? Later on, through our project, then we decided to do the soccer piece, and this is when we got and bought this other side. But during that time period, then that's when the city brought this land to the urban service area, which then has now created a lot more opportunities to rethink about what the land use could be and how do you develop the land for not just our use, but how do you make it work into a bigger ecosystem within the city's vision as well.
So what's when you look at the master plan for 10 years, 15 years out, what are those different phases? What's it going to look like?
Well, that's still a work in progress, and I say that is because we don't know what everyone else's plans are. The city's done a very good job of illustrating and describing what their vision would be for some of these potential corridors. We had already started doing some development, and that's why when we talked about opportunities in our primary businesses, we said, hey, let's hold off for a little bit because we don't want to be on an island by ourselves. This is my town, this is my city. I'm proud of the city as well, and I want this to work not just for our economic interests ourselves, but I want someone when they come into this part of the city to say, oh, this looked like this was planned. In order to do that, we've got to sometimes be patient and try to figure out what are some other ideas that other developers around the area are doing. How do we make this all work, especially on the other side where most of the growth's coming in.
It's going to be really interesting if we watch this video back 15 years from now, what the surrounding area will look like. I remember the first time I coached at Frederick Douglass for a few years. I remember the first time I ever went to a game before I coached there, and I remember looking behind the stadium, and I was like, man, this is crazy. There's just nothing back there. Like you looked, if you're sitting up in the stands, you looked and you could maybe see like a couple buildings. But now when you're sitting in the stands, it's like now you can see the hospital. Now you can see all these things, the way that Hamburg has grown. I I guess the city is now deeming this as a sports district. It's going to be really interesting to see kind of everything that goes around you. But another kind of a little bit of an aside is that it's hard for you all, I guess, without owning all of the property, unless the city buys in on this vision of a sports district and having things around it. It's kind of hard for you all to control the vision of this whole corridor because you don't own the property. Has there been any constraints on that of how you guys see the vision, or how do you see this corridor kind of growing through the future? What have kind of those conversations looked like?
Well, I mean, I would say that the stadium is clearly the anchor of at least what we're doing, and is bringing a lot of different traffic that's here. Now, in short term, when I say short term, over the next couple of years, it's some of those supporting things that make the experience work. Restaurants, hotels, all those type of things, and that's some of the things we're working on. We've got a Marriott Fairfield that'll be starting to develop next year, something that we've been working on for some period of time. There's other fast food restaurants type of stuff, Starbucks opening up here in the next month and a half, and there's some other groups like that we're in the works for. I think there's, other parts of the land you're holding off on a little bit because you want to be patient and get the right type of users that are going to make this thing work. So eventually we'll have other experience type of stuff. But we've received a lot of requests or inquiries from a variety of different other sports type of entities that wanted to be out here. But then you just got to say, how does it work? I mean, parking is still a constraint. It's always a challenge because everybody needs parking, but it doesn't get used all the time. The new parking requirements the city has, makes it a little bit more of a challenge. But in a perfect world, we could build more parking structures that allow us to do a lot, but that requires city's participation. And so far, we've had limited part of that.
The right partner can make or break your development project. That's why Bowman's integrated services, from landscape architecture to planning and engineering, are trusted by the region's top developers. With deep roots in Lexington and the backing of a national network, Bowman has helped shape some of Central Kentucky's most iconic projects. They know the land, the process, and what it takes to get things built. Ready to move forward with confidence? Call William Hodges, regional leader, at 859-309-6501. Bowman, where vision meets precision. Learn more at bowman.com.
Yeah. Forgive my ignorance. This is a little bit backtracking, but I think that something that's interesting about this project and what you hinted at earlier of it really is, when you're sitting here, it's cool seeing the stadium here, but there's a lot more going on in this little node than just a stadium. Can you talk a little bit about the vision of why put a sporting club in Lexington? Like, why soccer? Also, why not just a professional team that plays here, one day out of every 2 weeks? There's obviously a lot of traffic kind of coming in and out as far as youth programs, multiple kind of quasi-professional teams, practice fields, all those things. What was kind of the vision for that originally?
Yeah. Well, you go back to the origin of this, on this particular project, my partners, Bill and Donna Shively, they had similar visions of, things that we wanted to do. And they have young kids, I have young kids, mine aren't as young anymore. But we recognized some of the things that the city needed. We would travel and say, man, this city's got this unbelievable sports complexes in these fields, like, why don't we have that? And we looked at there's a project in town the city's been trying to put together for a long period of time that was supposed to be a sports complex, but it required a bunch of different sports groups to work together to make it work. And, for whatever reason, that's never been figured out. And I'd say that my partners and I decided, well, let's just do it. On a real personal level, I got my oldest daughter, who is a sophomore now at Princeton. She plays soccer there. When she was 10 or 11 years old, she was a very good player, but we were forced to go to Cincinnati 5 days a week. 5 days a week, so that she could get the right, get in the right program. And I'm like, I was thankful that I could make that work, but doing it after years and years, I said, there's something wrong with this. there's something wrong with this because there's some really great players that just don't have the ability to do it. Maybe it's financial or their parents couldn't do it. And you know, that never set well with me. Just opportunities for people. And then I was like, well, how do you know, what do you got to do to make this thing work? And when you really got to figure out and say, how do you make it work? You know, it needs a lot. You need to have great facilities. You got to have great coaches. You got to have a long-term vision. And you got to be in for the right reason, because there's no money to be made in soccer. Okay, this is, you know, it's kind of weird to say, you know, private equity, venture capitalist, you know, you think of that's what but there are, you know, there are periods of time and projects you do that you think that you do it because you think it's impactful and impactful to a community, and you know, I think this is one of them. So you know, it was like, well, we do this thing, let's do it right. Actually, before we ever got to the pros, it's really started with the youth. You know, it's like, how do we create an opportunity that has a world-class complex here, and we want to make sure we have the best leagues in the world, and understanding how, like, on, you know, for women college recruiting, right? Well, there's certain leagues you need to be in, and how do you get in those leagues? Well, you know, you got to have the right facilities and right coaches, and so it took this whole ecosystem. We ultimately got to the pro side. It's like, okay, so how do you make this thing like why are so many people dropping out of the sport at these older ages? And I recognize that there was an opportunity for people. Some people maybe because they just didn't see the opportunity collegiately, and I think that problem was because they weren't in the clubs weren't in the right programs, which we had to fix. And then, you know, for like in the women's soccer, like there wasn't a lot of opportunities professionally. So I think that the professional side says, how do you make this thing aspirationally? At that time too, when my experience when I was up in Cincinnati with my daughter, this was the time when FC Cincinnati was in the USL, made the move to the MLS. As a venture capitalist, we had an opportunity to take a look at that offering. And it allowed me to sort of spend some time really digging in to understand what professional sports is, trying to think through what soccer is long-term in our community and throughout our nation. The World Cup's coming up next year, you know, and we looked at a couple of other opportunities, because it seemed like more professional sports was starting to become an interesting investment class, which is now seems to be a little bit more popular. But, you know, 8 years ago, it was, you know, I'd say it's still speculative, but it was not as popular as it is today. So we ultimately, my partners and I said, well, if we're going to do this thing, let's just do it here. And let's do something that, you know, we can hopefully look back and say, man, this has impacted lives. And impacted lives because we've got an Hispanic community and a Congolese community, and a lot of these communities were operating independently. And, you know, it was now, how do we integrate them in, because they're part of Lexington too, and how do we get them involved? And so this is still a work in progress, because we can sit there and say, you know, this is a problem throughout the whole entire country. You know, soccer takes money, and, you know, that's a barrier. And how do we close that barrier? Well, we say, okay, we won't charge people for it. Well, then that's still not solve the problem. You know, you still got to get people around the country. So we made a decision to make a significant investment to making sure that money's never a problem for someone. So when we say make an impact, I'm talking about but it's got to do all these things. You got to have facilities, and you got to have jobs for people, and you got to be able to create opportunities for kids to get involved if the parents can't pick them up. So now we got 2 vans that'll go into communities and pick them up and get them to practice. And then if they get old enough, they're good enough, we're going to cover your way to go down to Miami for the showcase or whatever that is, because it's just the right thing to do. So from that perspective, it's been very, very rewarding.
Craftsman Contractors is Central Kentucky's one-stop shop for roofing, windows, siding, and gutters. CraftsmanContractors.com/contact us will get you straight to the form you need, so their team will get in touch about your project. Or just text Stephen at 859-246-0108. When they finish your project of windows, siding, gutters, or roofing, you'll see what they mean when they say we build with integrity.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, I think there's like probably two parts. You tell me if I'm wrong here, but there's probably two parts to your brain as it goes, or your thought process as it goes to evaluating this project. For me, as like a real estate person, you're thinking just all about like ROI and cap rates and IRR and like, what are these outlots towards the interstate worth? There's also, and is that a quote unquote successful project in that sense? But then you're also thinking about what you just mentioned of, am I impacting the community? Are we able to, pick up kids that maybe couldn't have afforded to or been a part of this program otherwise if we weren't able to front that cost? To me, that sounds like a successful project. How has that kind of balance happened for you? Like, how are you kind of thinking through as an entrepreneur? Has there been like a switch that's flipped as you've gone through this project, or how have you guys had to adjust your expectations on, no, this is, it's making an impact on the community? That's kind of what we're hopeful with DevelopLex, is that we can kind of highlight projects and people that are making an impact on the community. To me, it sounds like a success, but has there been kind of a moment where a switch is flipped of like, oh, this is a successful project? Like Lexington is being supportive of this project. We're making an impact on kids. This has been a successful project.
Yeah, I think that this project we do get a look at it from both angles of the feel-good part of it and also the economic part of it. The economic part of it's going to be, we're going to be successful developers in what we do. Do good commercial deals that are going to be good to support this development, but our community. But at the same time, we can also do the soccer component. I do believe there's, long term, is there a way for this to work? Absolutely, on the soccer-wise, economically, that needs to be sustainable for long term. But that's, and that's a work in progress. But it's not one of those things that you sit there and say, how to make this thing work in 2 or 3 years. It's got to think decades down the road. And, the stadium, it's partially, there's some fixed elements to it, and there's a lot of modular components, and that's part of the, big part of the challenge of developing a stadium, because this is a brand new club. And so what you've got your fan base from being day one, hopefully is not what the fan base is in 2 years and 10 years and 20 years. But when you build things like this, especially, the city didn't build this. This is privately funded. And most stadiums around the country are, there's a public-private partnership. So on this particular one, it was, there was some stuff the city was helpful on, but the stadium, we had to build it ourselves, and so we had to figure out what do we need to build, make it work. So we're able to, what we have here is a capacity of 7,600 seats that we think that takes care of our, short-term goals. And I'll say short-term, I don't even want to put a defined frame because I can't wait till we can do the expansion side of this, where we can take this from 7,600 to 12 to 15,000. Somewhere in those two is going to be the sweet spot of that. But you had to build this where, it doesn't look modular, because there are parts of modular, but at the same time have the flexibility long term to build something bigger when the market demand's there. But a lot of that's going to happen with all the other things that we got to do around here. The hotels, the restaurants, the bars. People need to be able to have the experience side of it. That's always the chicken in the egg that has to happen. You want more experienced type of stuff. People, got to have households, and you start saying, what's this thing going to look like in 10 years? Well, I believe there's going to be 10, 15,000 new homes across the street. I believe is what the city's planned are. And I think that you're going to find ourselves, a commercial little hub that's right here. Really, I don't know if there's going to be a big distinction between Hamburg and this area, because I think it's all ultimately going to connect the way it is between the road systems and where it's at. So I think it's going to feel like one continuation of what that is.
And was there infrastructure program from the city that you all benefited from?
Yeah, we that's the city had already had the sewer system out here. When they took over, they had to take over some issues across the street some time ago, and when that happened, they built the sewer system that was here. When we did come out here, the city did have some incentives that were due to help with a few things. The state was helpful on a few things, and really, but some of these incentives with the state really after we generate sales tax type of stuff. The city wasn't interested to do another TIF and other things that really needed to be done to help make this thing work. But there were some other things that we are able to do that's generating jobs and employment stuff to give some recapture a few things that over, next 10 years or so, I think we have the ability to recapture. So in that regards, they were helpful. But, it takes a lot of capital up front to make this thing work. Just the soccer stuff alone, it's about $100 million that you're seeing here, between stadiums and training fields and then all the infrastructure that you see up front, because, it costs a lot of money to do everything. We moved over 1 million cubic yards of material, rock and dirt.
Very well.
Trying to make that work, that's expensive. We had a cross under the 8th and Boonesboro, 2 different places for the sewer system. There's a pump station across the street. But what's great about where we're at is that all the things that we're planning on doing with this development, we have sewer capacity. So the city's trying to work with the other developers, figuring out the rest of it. But this property, before we bought it, there was the pump station on the other side of the property that we own. It kind of locked in some capacity, which made it nice, so we could go ahead and put the money in the infrastructure, knowing that we got sewer, we got electric, we got water, and the city's been very helpful. Once we got past the zoning part, everyone at planning, they've really been good partners, helping us. They got rules. They tell us how we got to fall within their rules, but I think they want everyone to be successful, so we've had a good experience to make that work.
Man, there's so many just baseline questions I want to ask, and I'm just retracting those because many people may already know these answers. But even from the inception, how did you? One, I just think about the sellability of the project. It is crazy. Even you talking about the amount of rock that you all moved. As you get off of the exit on 104, you see the amount of rock on the. It was always going to be that way, but you guys looked at this project, looked at the space, and said, we're going to do that. How did you actually sell the project to folks and how did you think I'm sure there were studies of some sort, but maybe talk through the process of someone that's ignorant like myself in this world of why 7,600 person stadium? A lot of the why, but how did you sell the project to folks that were interested? Because you did have to sell coaches on jumping from wherever they were to being a part of the program. You did have to sell construction crews on really taking a chance on building the project. How did you do that?
Well,
and you guys are having to now sell tenants on being a part of the project.
So there's a lot of questions within that question. So let's break it down to why 7,500, why 7,600. We did do a market study. In the day, it's there's to build a stadium, to make really stadiums work, yes, there's a need of what do we need for soccer, but you also sit there and say, what are needs for other experiences like concerts and those type of things over time. And the market studies that came to us said, hey, really, you've got Kroger's Fields, your Rupp Arena, but there are a lot of venues that don't need something that size. And really the 6,500, 7,000 was the range that we were given. For us to get the level that we wanted to do with the soccer, there was minimum requirements with U.S. Soccer as well as USL, and we needed to be at the 7,500 seat piece. So those two things married pretty well together, why that number. So that's how we came with that. When you get into the actual, how do you convince, the coaches and all that kind of stuff to work, that was the easy part. Because at that point, I think everyone sees that we made a significant investment. We're in. This is not, you don't do this and say, test it out for a couple of years. You do this because you're saying this is something we're going to be doing, we're committed to probably past, our lifetimes. And I think they see that. Especially at the level we're at, Division II on the men's side or Division I on the women's side. People see there's a huge investment with that. Our city sells. We got a great community. We've got a great city. People come here and they say, man, this is an awesome town. And they want to be a part of that. And I think it has to do with us as people, but also as our city. People here are kind, they're friendly. And you know what? People want to be a part of that. We always tell our kids kindness is free, and I think that a lot of people in our community are very kind, good people, and I think that people come into our town, see that, and now as you combine the infrastructure, you combine the capital commitment, because, we operate close to like what you would think an MLS team does, and we have a private chefs for the players. They get all the resources they need. We have indoor facilities. We're building a brand new indoor facility out here. They've got everything you need to be successful, and not everywhere in the country has that. And even at the Division II level in the men's, there's more limited resources.
DevelopLex is also sponsored by Community Trust Bank. Hi there, this is Cam Dacey, Commercial Loan Officer at Community Trust Bank and avid DevelopLex and Middle Tech podcast listener. Community Trust offers a wide variety of home loans, commercial loans, and small business loans to suit your financial needs, as well as mobile banking, internet banking, and bill pay. Their friendly and professional staff would love to assist you at one of their 6 Lexington locations. Community Trust Bank is committed to building communities built on trust. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, subject to credit approval.
I think a really neat thing about this project, and one is your all's level of commitment to the project, but I think that what I do know about this industry is there are just developers around the country that come and do these types of investments in cities like Charlotte or Raleigh or Knoxville or whoever that maybe aren't like a homegrown version of. So I do think it's neat that you're an accessible person that cares about the community, that has lived in the community for a long time, and is also saying we're planting our flag, we're going to invest in here, not just from an ROI perspective, but because we want to see the community change. Lexington is a really unique market. I think oftentimes we kind of buy in on projects that are like that. The hope is that we buy in on projects that are like that. What is one thing about the stadium or the team or maybe just a fixture of this project that you hope that people in Lexington see and they're like, oh, that's really cool. Like that's maybe an ode to Lexington, or that's something that took like some real big thought of like a Lexingtonian to do.
Well, that's sometimes there's a little luck that goes in some of that stuff. Well, number one, I think it's really cool as you come into a game and you'll see a whole bunch of different people. And, one of the names that we were thought about as a club is call it Unity, and because we really wanted this to be a place that unites people. We want this to be a place, you don't see us do a lot of political stuff or a lot of agenda pieces. We want this to be a place where people just come and celebrate life and celebrate the sport together and see all types of walks of life. It's been great. I'll go and I'll see the different demographic groups that maybe I wouldn't see all the time that are here, and and that's really cool feeling that's there. I think also it's like to make every great city successful, you need to have different types of experiences. There are other things that I may not have an interest in, and I hope that someone picks up the torch and does it as well, because to make city of Lexington even better than it is now today is we need to have all those things. We need to have other sports components. We need to have other arts. It just takes people to champion them. And so, we hope we just did our part, and we hope that other people do their other parts too. And, we can look back in 10 years from now and our city becomes even greater.
And looking forward for the next 10 years, aside from this project, what do you hope Lexington looks like? What projects that are exciting you right now on the community, economic, real estate development?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of what we continue to go through from the standpoint of balancing, preserving the great green space that we have, but also understanding there's a way to grow as well, but do it smartly. And so I'm hoping that in looking 10 years from now that we have more of a cooperation between the two different sides to figure out how to, make this thing work for everyone. I think we kind of did that on this particular project, working with the various groups behind the scenes to say, okay, where can we go that's less impactful to some of the horse farms, and how can we design this to make this thing work great for the community? Because part of our goal and I think the other city's goal is help redevelop some of the parts that have already been developed here, right? Because this is the first exit that you come into Lexington, and there's some buildings here that were tired and that need some love. And so strategically, you can work with people and say, okay, we accomplished a lot. Not only did we bring what we think a great offering to our community here. But since then, if you look at what's happened is that there's been a lot of other speculators who came in that I think that you'll see in 5-10 years ago that are going to make some parts of maybe that, I don't want to call them tired, that could have some improvements. I think it's going to look a lot different. And I'm hoping that what'll happen is that the efforts that we went through with some of these groups of finding that balance, that other developers and other stakeholders can do that as well, because I really do believe we can make a great city that keeps our identity of this horse capital of the world, but at the same time have smart growth. And I think it can be done, and I think it will be done. Like, I think we got I think there seems to be more of a willingness with some groups. I mean, but in order to do that is like, so, the city's expanded. Now we as developers have a responsibility to try to, be cognizant of that. And how do you do that? And how to be smart. And that's why, as Weston's, you brought some opportunities on commercial stuff here. And I said, let's just give it a little bit of time. A little bit of time, because we want to fit into the ecosystem around us. We want to understand, how do we fit into our goals with the city's goals, with the neighbors' goals, so this thing works. And I think that's how this works. And so 10 years from now, I'm hoping this area looks like it was, even though there was parts of it developed a long time ago, that it was all part of a master plan. We can incorporate some of the things that, how do you take that industrial, incorporate it in next to this residential and this new commercial, and make it look like it was planned.
That's awesome. Parting thought for the folks that listen to this program, see it on social, whatever it might be. What is one action item that you hope that they get from this interview, whether that be attending a game or bringing you a tenant or whatever it might be, messaging you and saying, this is a concept that we saw in X city that we really want out there? What would you encourage listeners of the program to do?
Well, I mean, number one, this is the biggest growth area in Lexington moving forward. I mean, this is the most land that they've allocated to their urban county expansion. So anyone in real estate realize that's going to happen. There's never been a demand of land issue here. There's been just a lack of land available to be developed. And now that that's been allocated out, it's coming. Now the question is when and where. I'd say that the soccer piece, it's going to be a fun year next year with the World Cup coming in. Actually, FIFA approached us and wants us to be a host city. We are considering trying to do some of that, but it requires a few more things. But I think this city and the whole entire nation, the whole world is going to be talking about soccer. And I think we're going to be the cornerstone of a lot of that. I think we're going to have, we're seeing our attendance grow every week. We're excited about. We got a game that's probably will air after our Louisville City game, but I think it'll be hopefully our first sellout. I think everybody that comes in, it's a fun experience, and I also think, especially we have a women's program. I mean, we have had so many people that are coming in our community in cities, like really our cities may be too small to be at the level that we're playing on for, but we love that, right? I love it when Phoenix comes into Lexington or Dallas comes into Lexington. We have an opportunity to show everyone what Lexington is, and part of that is having a great experience inside the stadium, which comes with fans. So hope people come out. I hope they support it. We got players from around the world. That's part of that's part of their experience in our city of feeling supported and loved. Real estate opportunities. We're trying to figure out how to make this thing great. We hope to have some great partners and have no question that will bring those right partners will come. We're going to be patient, so we're not going to do everything today, but we're going to be smart about it and love to get any ideas that people have on how to make this thing even better.
Well, Stephen, thank you and your partners for your commitment to the city of Lexington. This is obviously, I really can't emphasize enough getting on the interstate now versus 3 years ago. Just completely different vision for what's out here. So thank you for your commitment to the city of Lexington.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.